Welcome back, or welcome if you're new here. I'm JB and I like to read books and talk about them. And if you're into that, please consider hitting that subscribe button. This is my 11th video since starting this booktube channel. And I thought I'd kick off the next 10 by trying to put together my top 10 favorite books of all time. Now 2025 was such a big reading year for me. I read 24 books this year, which for a guy who usually averages like 14 a year, this felt like a really big accomplishment. In my lifetime, I think I've probably read somewhere around 150 books, but my biggest challenge with coming up with this list was I was looking at my Goodreads list and I had a bunch of 5-star books that I read like 6 years ago, and for the life of me, I just couldn't tell you a single main character's name or a plot point to save my life. So please tell me in the comments I'm not the only one who experiences this. My brain just processes the feelings that I'm reading, decides if it likes the book, and then just deletes the plot and moves on to the next book. And so for my list, I had 3 rules. Number 1, how memorable was the book to me? Did it stick with me? Do I still think about the book? Did it shape me in some sort of way? Number 2, would I reread it? Now, I don't reread books ever. Books aren't like movies or TV shows for me. I could rewatch something like The Office or Dumb and Dumber like 100 times and it'll always be my comfort comedy, but I just haven't found that in books yet. So this is kind of like that stranded island question. If I'm Tom Hanks on a deserted island, would I actually want to reread this? And rule number 3, books I'd recommend to people I like. Now, I love getting recommendations for books, music, movies, TV shows, coffee shops. I just love the excitement of people's favorite things. I think it's a good way of connecting with people and getting to know them just a little bit better. Everyone likes different things, and I think it's kind of cool to share that with each other. And so with all that being said, let's get into my top 10 favorite books. But before I get into them, I just want to start off with some rapid fire honorable mentions. This is just in case I ever decide to do like a top 20 list. I would love to compare my list now with the list that I make in the future. There's just so many books that I still want to read, so many authors that I've yet to discover. So I'm sure if I make this video in the future, this list is gonna look a lot different. And so for my honorable mentions, I wanna give a shout out to Of Mice and Men, Fahrenheit 451, Life of Pi, The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, Mouse, James, The Poet X, The Perks of Being a Wallflower. Yeah. Okay, kicking off my list with number 10 is Tender as the Flesh by Austina Bazterrica. I'm putting this book on my list because I've never read anything like it. For days, I could just not stop thinking about that last chapter, and I think that any author that can pull off an ending like that just elevates the book even more for me. It just made me sick to my stomach, and this was such a visceral reading experience that I don't think I'll ever forget. There's cannibalism, animal meat is poisonous, humans are bred for special meats. It's just an awful world and an awful story. And I did not think that I would enjoy reading something like that. And I think honestly, this book kind of put me onto reading more horror and even watching more horror films. This book is not going to be for everyone, so please read the trigger warnings. But I love this book. It was sick, it was twisted, and I hope one day A24 adapts it into a film. Number 9 is The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. This is my favorite series ever. I was a midnight premiere kind of fan for the Mockingjay films. I loved every book. I loved every film. I thought all the characters were super cool. There was Katniss, Cinna, Rue, Haymitch, Gale, Peeta, Effie Trinket. And specifically, I just want to credit this book for kicking off my interest in dystopian literature, because after reading this book, I just jumped into Divergent, The Maze Runner, Giver, and then I jumped straight into the classics like Fahrenheit 451, Handmaid's Tale, Animal Farm, Lord of the Flies, The Road. And these are some of my favorite books of all time, so this instantly became my favorite genre. And I also think that reading this kind of helped me train to question political systems and how I morally engage with political ideas. All of these books had some sort of commentary on war, violence, poverty, food insecurity, censorship, power, and they just kind of gave me a space to kind of think about these ideas. And so shout out to The Hunger Games. I can't wait to see Sunrise and the Reaping in theaters next year. So I'm thinking about even rereading the series next year before I go see that. All right, number 8 is Klara in the Sun. Now, usually when people talk about Ishiguro, they bring up Never Let Me Go, but this is my favorite book of his. It just has one of the saddest endings of any book that I've ever read. Now, the main character of this book is Klara, a humanoid robot whose sole purpose is to be a companion to a child. Now, they call these robots artificial friends. And I think what I love most about this book is that Klara just has this unique way of looking at the world. And in a way, it kind of reminded me of Toy Story and how their entire existence is kind of tied to the happiness of a child. And Toy Story was just one of my favorite films growing up. I remember feeling sad when they were locked up in Sid's room. And it just reminded me so much of that film growing up. And this book kind of explores some of those themes of love, devotion, care. And I think there's just something so beautiful about this artificial friend that has a soul. And it was very Pixar-esque. Tearjerker for sure. And if you haven't read this one, definitely go check it out. All right, number 7 is The Hike by Drew Magary. This is my favorite book of 2025, so there might be some recency bias here. But this is easily the most fun book I've read in a long time. It's a genre-bending book that is one part survival, one part horror, and then you mixed in with a little epic fantasy adventure. And it just reminded me so much of some of my favorite guy comedies growing up. And I think the best way that I can describe this book is it's kind of like Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle. We have this guy, his name is Ben. He goes on a work trip and he takes a hike around the hotel, and then he gets lost, and then all sorts of bizarre things start to happen. There's giants, there's talking crabs, we have all sorts of absurd situations. But I think at the heart of the story, it's just a guy who wants to go home to his wife and kids. And the ending of this book is absolutely incredible. One of my favorite book endings of all time. I just had so much fun reading this book, and I think at the end of the day, reading should be fun, something that I enjoy doing at the end of every night. And so this is my go-to recommendation for someone who's looking for a weird, funny, hilarious book. All right, so number 6 is a combo between The Kite Runner and A Thousand Splendid Suns. Both of these books came from Khaled Hosseini. I first read The Kite Runner, loved it. Then I read A Thousand Splendid Suns, and I think I love this book even more. I love the writing in both of these books, and I think the best way to describe them is just devastating beauty. Reading these books to me kind of felt like watching a movie. Hosseini uses these non-linear sort of timelines with flashbacks between the past and the present, and I think it just does a great job of building this intense dramatic irony that just makes everything feel even more emotional. But I think more than that, I think both of these books showed me how important it is to read books by people from other cultures, other backgrounds. For so many years, I only knew of the Middle East from what's been shown on the news post 9/11. It allowed me to understand the culture a little bit more. And I think it just speaks to the importance of reading historical fiction when our world, I feel, needs a little more empathy more than ever. And so this book also has one of my favorite quotes of all time, that one being "for you 1,000 times over." And it's kind of like that Tony Stark Marvel one, the "I love you 3000." And I haven't heard of this author writing any books recently in a while. I'm sure lots of research goes into writing historical fiction like this. So if you have any recommendations in the comments, I want to jump into this genre a little more this year, please let me know in the comments. Okay, number 5 is Boy's Life by Robert McCammon. So I was watching this YouTube video by another booktuber, and someone in the comments recommended this book. And so I responded to that comment saying that someone else online recommended this book as a fan of Stranger Things, and they said for whatever it's worth, this is my top 3 favorite book of all time. And so it's just some stranger on the internet, but when someone tells me something is their favorite anything of all time, I'm just immediately curious. And so this book was already on my radar, and then I just moved this to the top of my TBR list. I read this in about a week and a half, and already it's in my top 5 favorite books of all time. I think it's just an incredible coming of age story. Those are usually my favorite. It just reminded me so much of all of my favorite films growing up, like The Sandlot, The Goonies, Stand By Me, E.T. I think there's something so freaking magical about this book. It's so nostalgic and how it made me think of my childhood, the summers I spent riding my bike around town, playing baseball, the 4th of July, your first crush, your first dog. And there's also this cool little mystery and magical realism thing here that gives that Stranger Things vibes. And I think this book just hit me so hard because I feel like I've lost so much of my youth and wonder in these past few years. Like, I've been dealing with some mental health issues, and I think this book kind of had me thinking, like, damn, like, what happened to all my magic that these young kids have? And I feel like I have a lot of that older attitude of a lot of the men in this book. And so I was just questioning, like, how can I get this magic back? And so while I figured that out, I'm glad I found this book at this point in my life. I think sometimes we need that reminder, and I'm hoping this book can be that push that I need to get back of that magic of what it's like to be a 12-year-old me again. Because like I said, sometimes all it takes is remembering. So go read this book. I think it's one of the best coming of age books I've ever read in my life, and I will be continuing to revisit this one for years to come. When I stepped out into the bright sunlight from the darkness of the movie house, I only had 2 things on my mind: Paul Newman and a ride home. Number 4 is The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton, another coming-of-age classic, one of my favorite book openings of all time. Stay gold, pony boy. Do it for Johnny. I think this book will forever just be in my heart. After graduating college, I got hired to be an 8th grade English teacher, and I just honestly had no idea what I was going to teach that year. And the only book I ever remember reading in 8th grade was The Diary of Anne Frank. And so that whole summer while I was planning out my curriculum, my wife said, "Why don't you teach The Outsiders?" And I had never heard of The Outsiders. I never watched the film, never read the book. No one had ever told me about it. And so she gave me her copy of the book and her DVD. She said it's one of her favorite books of all time. And so then I read it. I watched it, and then I just immediately fell in love with the story and the film. And so after that, I ended up teaching The Outsiders year after year for the 3 years that I was a middle school teacher. I even wrote some curriculum for it, and that ended up winning me an award, Jane Ortner Grammy Museum Education Award. So if you ever visit the museum in LA, you can see my name there on a plaque. I also got this cool photo with Lady Gaga. But my students would read this novel, we'd listen to some 60s music, make the historical connections from the time period. We'd do some cool little projects with this. I'd also wear like a leather jacket when I introduced the novel. And like any new teacher, I had no idea what I was doing, to be honest, but I think this book represents the moment that I fell in love with teaching. And so shout out to my wife and The Outsiders for that. All right, number 3 is Project Hail Mary. This is just a 5-star banger. Amaze, amaze, amaze. I can't wait for the film to come out this year. Just like Jazz Hands for Rocky. Now, if you haven't read this, you won't get those references, but this is just one of my favorite books and one of my favorite characters of all time. This is just a fun, easy to read book. And I don't read a lot of science fiction, but this book was super accessible. I have zero knowledge of anything physics, biology, chemistry. So to me, Weir did such an incredible job of breaking things down through like metaphors and analogies. There's also a lot of science experiments in this, so you are engaged in the problem-solving process. And this book also just has the type of humor that I enjoy, and just like fist bumps all around. This is one of the most entertaining books that I've ever read. I just sat there, just enjoyed the ride. Just a total feel-good story of 2 buddies trying to save the world. And so I'm going to reread this one next year, but probably by listening to the audiobook. Everyone is saying the audiobook's amazing. And again, I can't wait for the movie. Okay, number 2 is Crying in H Mart. Of all the books that are on this list, this is the only one that I've reread, and this is one that I will continue to reread every year or so. And if you're unfamiliar with this one, this is a story of Michelle Zauner losing her mother to cancer, but also about the fear of losing her cultural identity. So she uses traditional Korean cooking and visits the supermarket H Mart as a way to reclaim her heritage and preserve the memories of her mother. And I don't think I've ever read anything that is this raw and authentic. It just also triggers so much food nostalgia for me. My grandmother in particular expressed her love to us through food. We'd go over to her house, and she's always making sure that we're fed. She'd add extra tortillas on top of our plate without even asking. We'd go to her front yard to pull out some fruit from her trees, her mole, the pozole, the tamales, and also even her attempts to make Americanized food like pancakes and hamburgers when we were kids, and we'd go over there during the summer. And food has just been such a huge love language for a lot of the people in my life. My mother and her potato tacos. My dad, he would cook up the most random soups of all time and just throw whatever vegetable was in the kitchen at the time into it. My wife and her breakfast. My mother-in-law and her tortillas. My father-in-law's going out for breakfast and chicken wraps, barbecues. It's just a way of people saying I love you. And I think expressing love through a plate of food is such a universal feeling that this book made me appreciate how affection can be shown in different ways. This is definitely a book that will make you cry. This is her debut novel, and I thought it was just incredible, amazing. I'm excited to see her follow-up. I think she's currently working on that right now. I'm also a big fan of her music. Japanese Breakfast is one of my favorite bands. I always try to go check them out whenever they're in concert around town. So this also kind of just puts the book up higher up on my list. Her music pairs really well with this book, especially her first album. And my top favorite book of all time is The Brief Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde. I credit this book for turning me into a reader. I was an English major in college and was pretty close to changing my major for like the 5th time. I was reading classics on Shakespeare, Chaucer, British literature, the Romantic movement, and I was just struggling to get through the reading. As you can tell, I don't have a lot of classics on this list or a lot of serious literature. I also didn't really enjoy the books that we read in high school. My teachers had us reading A Tale of Two Cities, The Canterbury Tales, The Scarlet Letter, and it was just honestly torture for me. But finally, in my junior year of college, I took a contemporary fiction and English course, and that professor had us reading the modern classics. So I remember reading a book called A Visit from the Goon Squad, White Teeth by Zadie Smith, and then this book, Oscar Wilde. And this book, to me, just broke all the rules of what I thought serious literature was supposed to sound like. This book had Spanish words, there were references to 90s hip-hop, comic books. The writing just had a really unique voice and a playful rhythm to it that I just had never read anything like it before. I also really connected to the main character. He was a really nerdy character. I also got a history lesson on the Dominican Republic, and this book had tons of footnotes in it, and even those felt fun to read. And so yeah, I credit this book for turning me into a reader and just kind of showing me that my voice belongs in books. And yeah, that's my list, my life in 10 books. I'm sure as I keep reading through 2026 and beyond, this list is going to change, and I can't wait to see how. And so if any of these are your favorites, or if you have any recommendations based on this list, please let me know in the comments. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.